So hello and welcome everyone to our introduction to conscious boundaries and choice. Thank you all so much for being here. So again, this will be anywhere between 60 and 90 minutes. We'll include lots of information, as much as your brain can hold, hopefully, and then a little bit of time to kind of meditate and integrate some of this. Again, any questions that come up, feel free to use the chat, and we'll open up to questions at the end as well. So if you want to just take a moment and just close your eyes and just sit in a seat where you're comfortable and where you're being held. Make sure it's a seat that you can feel you can really relax into, that you're in a comfortable position. And to start, just take some nice, full, deep, full body breaths. You don't need to worry too much about how fast or slow you're breathing. Just make sure you're really filling and emptying your lungs, so there's not any shallow breathing. And if you're able to, and if you'd like to, if you breathe in and out of your nose, just simple nasal breathing just helps to calm the nervous system down. So that's a nice, easy way to just quickly kind of settle your body, settle your mind. Just do a little scan through your own body. And if there's any parts that feel like you're holding some tension or stress, any areas that look kind of dark, or I don't know, the energy just doesn't look as nice and bright as you want it, you can just imagine that you're breathing in and out of those parts of your body. And just set the intention that that energy can relax, it can soften. You're really in a space now where you can just simply be. And if you notice that you have any barriers up, any armor that you're wearing energetically, any parts of you that are feeling a bit on edge or stressed, or maybe a bit defensive, a bit nervous, again, just take a moment to breathe into those parts of you. And you don't have to do anything or know anything in particular to allow that to ease off. Just setting that intention and allowing that to happen will start that process. You just want to bring your awareness into your heart. And if you have any intentions for this evening, anything that you're wanting to learn or understand, or anything that you're just ready to surrender, you can speak that intention into your heart now. If you want to take another nice deep breath or two, whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. And welcome again. If you'd like to share where you're joining from, and if you have any questions that you want to ask now, we will just go ahead and get them in there. I'll make sure that I get around to them at some point tonight. If you're comfortable sharing that in the chat. And if there's any intentions or anything that you're wanting to share, there's always a resonance there. So it's always fun to see how we all agree with each other. So feel free to type away in the chat. I'd be happy to hear from you. So hello, Caroline and Halima. Hey, Arletta, listening with one ear while getting little humans ready for bed. That's absolutely great. I hope it's graceful for you. So hello, Teresa. So while y'all are saying hello and introducing yourselves, I'll do a really quick introduction for those of you who don't know me. Really briefly, my name is Jennifer Main, and what do? I work with people one-to-one and in groups and events, really helping people to tap into their intuition and their own intuitive senses so that they can understand their own internal compass and be guided by that instead of feeling like they have to seek answers and guidance and things from other people. which is a little bit of the boundary stuff we're doing tonight. I've written a book on boundaries. I've taught lots of classes around it. And the reason why I talk about this a lot is because I feel like it fits in with everything, like every facet of life. Everything that we do has a connection with boundaries. And I think that the clearer we can get on that, and the more we can understand what it means to have healthy boundaries, to choose them, to embody them and integrate them, the easier life becomes, the healthier life becomes. Yeah, it just makes life so much easier when we have a handle on it. I will say at the beginning, though, it is a journey, it's a process. It's something that we're all learning all the time, and you learn throughout your life and through each relationship. You learn what you could maybe heal to help you. You learn what you could do a little bit better, what could be a little bit clearer. Any strengths that you could add into that, your values, things like that are all a part of that. So we'll go more into all of that tonight. But just to say, this is not something to, if you haven't had great boundaries in the past, or if you're struggling with that now, you are not alone. The whole world this is stuff that we're all dealing with and working with. So you're in the right place. So hello, Jennifer. Lester, love your boundary teachings, very helpful for life. Thank you so much, Lester. I appreciate that. Katrina's in stormy Southampton, the UK one. Catching drips from an unfixed roof. My boundary metaphor of the day. I love that. I'm sorry that your roof is leaking, but yes, that does fit perfectly. It's gotten a bit stormy in Edinburgh in the last hour too. So yeah, it's up here as well. Hopefully it's going to be okay. Yes. So one of the things that I've realized, just briefly, why I really started to teach boundaries so much is that, over the years, I recognized that my boundaries were not great, and could recognize where I was struggling or suffering, or it was creating problems in relationships and dynamics that weren't great. And then I had a few things happen in my life where things kind of blew up because I wasn't dealing with them. I was doing the normal coping human thing of, well, I'll just, I'll let it go. I'll just see what happens. I also had kind of that internal dialogue of, oh, well, the people I'm dealing with are grown-ups, they'll figure it out. And they didn't. And I got very hurt by those instances, and, it was really difficult, but I learned a lot from them. And one of the big things I learned was that, I could look back and go, if I had addressed this here, if I'd had a conversation here, if I'd challenged this here, if maybe we'd clarified this here, maybe some of this could have been avoided, or maybe not avoided, but it could have been resolved before it became a big problem. So it really taught me the benefit of addressing things when they were smaller or subtle, instead of waiting until they become a massive drama or conflict. So if that's one thing you go away with tonight, I think that will be useful, just planting that seed of deal with it when it's small, and then it becomes much easier to deal with. So I kind of had that happen a number of years ago. And then for about a year, about 95% of the clients that came to me with boundary issues. It was amazing. I was like, okay, I'm really going to learn about this now. I'm really going to understand this. And so all my sessions, I started teaching workshops and writing about it. So it was clearly something that I definitely needed more of in my life, and felt able to offer and support people through with as well. So that's kind of my journey through this. Basically I've kind of broken it down because I want to help demystify, because I know when people start talking about boundaries, it can get really complex. It can trigger a lot for people. It can bring up old pain and suffering and things like that. So I really want to kind of break it down into the kind of the core elements of it, just to help get you some clarity, instead of it being like, oh, this is an overwhelming thing, I don't know even where to start. You can start to kind of look at, oh, okay, well, if I start with addressing these things, then I can have a look at this, and then these are the results of that. So basically, when I think about boundaries, what boundaries mean to me is choice. So the boundaries that we have in our lives are the choices that we make every day. And we make thousands of choices every day. So So that may be a little bit of why people feel a little overwhelmed with it, is because we make a lot of choices every day. And some of those choices are quite habitual. We follow certain schedules, some of those are dictated a little bit by our work, our family, things like that. But the what's the word? Not danger, that's too strong of a word. The difficulty with that is that when we let things become too habitual, and when we are simply going along with that, if it's working really healthy and working, if you really condition things so that they're great, amazing. If they're not, that's when you need to start addressing things. And that's when you start to look at the choices that you're making every day. And what happens is that we become really conditioned to things. We accept conditions, we accept relationships, we accept dynamics, we accept things in our lives because either it's what we witnessed growing up with our parents or family members, or in our country or culture. We didn't have great examples of people who set boundaries or who understood that, or the values and the virtues and things that go with that. But also it's kind of that thing of, they talk about how if you put a frog in a pot of water that's cold and you just slowly increase the heat, it won't feel the heat, it'll just boil, it won't jump out of the pot. And we're like that. We get used to feeling a certain way and we think that it's normal. And we usually wait until it gets really bad before we go, oh, actually, this has been unhealthy for a long time. So again, that addressing it when it's smaller, when it's easier to kind of face. So we all just kind of accept things as they are because we think it's normal, or on some level, some deeper levels, maybe what we feel like we could deserve or what we get, or, things like that. We can have all these really interesting subconscious beliefs and emotions that are kind of playing out in a big part of that. So the first step is recognizing what's going wrong. And in some ways, that's the easiest place to start, because usually we can look at our lives and go, okay, something is not working for me here. So when we're looking at our kind of choices and relationships, and when I talk about relationships, I don't just mean with the people in your life. Everything is a relationship. Everything is relational. So we have relationships with money. We have a relationship with food. We have a relationship with our possessions, with our clothing. We have a relationship with the country that we live in. We have a relationship with nature around us. I have a relationship with the plant in the corner. We get along great. It's fun. But there's, it's kind of recognizing that this isn't just about the people in our lives. Our relationships and how we relate to the world is reflected in everything that we do. So it's the way we spend our money. It's the way we use our time. It's what we put our attention on. It's what we focus on. It's, whatever we are consuming through media, books, music, and again, that can be really positive stuff or things that are maybe not the healthiest for us. So this goes beyond human relationships. Your focus tonight might be, I want to have better boundaries with my partner or my parents or my kids or my coworkers. But actually, when you start to look at it in this wider scale, you start to recognize patterns. And when you can recognize patterns, that sometimes makes it easier to understand why the behavior is there and why you've chosen to kind of interact in that way. But you can first start to look at maybe the easiest way to get into it is start to look at what's not going well. What's kind of wrong here. I know that this doesn't feel healthy. I know that my relationship with money isn't good. I know that I've got too much clutter in my house. I know that I'm not dedicating enough time or energy to myself, my own physical health or my own mental health or my own spiritual health. You can start to look at those and recognize, okay, these are the things in my life I know are unhealthy. And if you can start to recognize what is contributing to that, what's contributing to the bad feelings, and sometimes it moves into kind of trauma, pain, suffering. It can run deep. And actually, a lot of times our unhealthy relationship dynamics are rooted in old trauma and pain and suffering. We'll talk about that more too. But when you can start to recognize what is going badly or what is unhealthy, then you can start to get clear on your no's. So for me, figuring out what your no's are is a great place to start. So anytime you feel overwhelmed, exhausted, there's too much going on, there's too much happening, I can't cope, that is when you know you need to start saying no to things. And this is often what people resist the most. So I start talking to people who are in burnout, who are exhausted, who are like chronically just, struggling with exhaustion. And I start to talk to them about what can you say no to? What can you start to let go of? And they're like, nope, 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 nope. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. And that's the emotional attachment stuff. And that is where we have assigned meaning to often inanimate objects, or we have assigned meaning to people that's not really theirs. It's not their label. It's not their identity. It's not their job. And the same for possessions. We often, people who maybe hoard a little bit or have a little too much clutter, or, I know some people will have 4 of the same thing when they only need 1. It's kind of recognizing, well, what importance have I assigned to this? What is it that I am trying to possess in that? Or what about me feels possessed or owned by that? Because, if you got too much clutter, it ends up owning you. It really does. Because what happens is that it takes up so much psychic and mental energy and effort to be in amongst all the clutter in your life. And when I say clutter, again, I'm talking a lot about kind of physical possessions. That can be a big part of it. And usually if a person is not saying no enough, it shows up as physical clutter. But that can also be around too many obligations. You're saying yes to too many things that you don't have time for, you don't have the energy for. It's draining you. It feels difficult. You're suffering because of it. And again, we're assigning meaning to something that isn't really clear, isn't really true. So basically what happens is we as human beings, we all have an ego, we all have identities and roles that we play. There's nothing wrong with the ego. It's not a bad thing. We assign a lot of bad things to it. We blame it for a lot of things. There's good stuff in the ego. Your ego is your sense of humor. It's your personality in this lifetime. There's loads of fun you can have with your ego. There's some good stuff that's there. But we will often build up identities of who we are, or the way we want to present ourselves, the way we want to project ourselves out to others. And we feel like we have to keep saying yes to that in order to fit in, to gain love, security, to belong, not belong, we'll talk about that later too, to have a place, to have meaning, to have value. So often it's kind of looking at we're kind of holding on to these either people or things or I don't know, experiences or, identities, roles, because we think it gives us an identity. And we spend our whole lives building these identities. And often a lot of what's in that, there will be some true stuff. There will be some beautiful things in there. But often we're holding on to roles and labels that are outdated, that don't fit us anymore, that we don't even want to have. We grow resentful having to hold on to those identities. But a part of us feels like we need to do it because the ego and our subconscious likes to have an identity. It likes to know who we are. And the more labels we can slap on, the more settled it feels. So this process of saying no to decluttering, and again, that's whether that's letting go of possessions or that's clearing out your calendar and saying no to some activities or saying no to some obligations that you've created over time. What that does is it starts to strip away some of those identities and the subconscious gets a little scared. So anything that we're talking about tonight takes some courage and it takes some willingness to address the hard stuff. Cancel that. It doesn't have to be hard, but it can sometimes feel hard. What I want to say as well is that when people talk about like healing, like it's great to go do courses and retreats. It's great to immerse yourself in stuff. This is the work. Like this is the heal. When people talk about healing, this is it. that it's addressing these issues, this is what is going to change things in your daily life. Go have your on the mountain experience. Go get filled up by these big events. Go and do them and love them and enjoy them. Come back and do this stuff. Come back and do the work here. Yeah. That's my one bit of go do this. So the first thing is really looking at, where is the no going to come? And even if I am nervous about it, even if I'm scared, even if it triggers stuff for me, if I intuitively know on a deeper level that it's the healthier choice, how can I make that choice? And how can I take that step? How can I take the action that's required there? So again, that can be decluttering your house. It can be kind of weeding out. So maybe not a full chuck out on everything. It's the choosing what you weed out. It's really looking at, okay, what's growing here? What's growing here that's not healthy, that's not beneficial for me, that's not really nurturing and feeding me? What can I start to weed out here? And also this thing, I talk about this every once in a while, this thing around watering dead plants. I don't know where I heard this from, but it's one of my favorites. I wish I could remember. I'd give them credit. But this notion of watering dead plants is this thing of we try to hang on to relationships that have already maybe run their course or finished. We try to hang on to things that we can't actually use anymore, that don't fit us, that are broken, that we're not going to fix, we're not going to do anything with. But again, we've got that attachment to it. So we're putting energy and effort just maintaining or holding on or keeping that stuff in our home, in our energy field, in our bodies. And again, it takes up a lot of energy just to have all of that going on. And again, really looking at, well, what role or identity does this represent for me? What does this say about me that I'm still hanging on to, that I'm still clinging on to, that I'm not quite ready to finish with? And what are some of the obligations within this? Because I hear all the time, they're like, somebody gave me this and I hate it. One of my friends she got given something as a wedding gift. And no, what was hilarious was that it was a family member or someone who gave it to her and basically said, if you don't like it, just give it back to me. So it was something she hated. And something that clearly there was no real emotional attachment to. It wasn't a great gift anyway. But she felt that she had to keep it. And anytime this family member came over, they'd haul it out and stick it on the table. And again, it was creating this resentment for her because she felt like she had to keep it. So there's often obligations in things that we hold on to. We think that, oh, I ought to keep that. It ought to be meaningful for me. I ought to feel a certain way about it, or I'm going to hurt somebody else's feelings with that. I mean, the reality is we can't control how people feel, and you can do things with kindness and compassion. Because actually, when you start to say no to things, when you start to say no to people, and you start to say no to the things that are draining and difficult, it is actually the most compassionate thing that you can do. Because when you release yourself from obligations, you release other people from obligations. So if you're looking at relationship dynamics, and you have a friendship where things are not going very well, or a family member or your partner, if you are playing a role because you think they need you to play a role and you don't want to play the role, on some level, they don't want you to either. Because it's not healthy. It's not nourishing the relationship. So if you actually take that step and say, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but if you say, no, I'm not going to play that role anymore. I'm not going to wear that identity. I'm not going to engage in that way anymore. What it does is it frees you, but it also frees them. Read that in. Because the argument I get from a lot of people is they're like, well, saying no is selfish, it's greedy, it's mean. It'll hurt people's feelings. But actually, if you do it from a place of love and compassion, it's compassionate for the other person too. And even if they understand it consciously or not, on some level, they will thank you for it. And it will change the dynamics of the relationship so that it can be lighter and so that it can be clearer. Yes. So if there's any questions with the no's, I mean, we'll go into a few more of these things as we go as well. But if anything's coming up, I'll check the chat real quick. Let's see. Hey, Stuart and Penny Cook, intentions to release the pain and hurt and insecurity that leads me to unhealthy inner dialogue and stops me from experiencing my day the way I want it to be. Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. You're in the right place. Arletta's in this point with material possessions, so fed up. Yeah, it's time to let stuff go. Totally ready to sort it. Although hard with two tiny humans. Yeah, that can complicate it. And pain point is so high at the moment. So I would say go into those pain points and go, is that pain actually real? Or is this just a fear of losing an identity? Is there a fear that I'm going to lose who I am, which isn't really who you are? Stuart, the same thing, keeping things where I may need in the future. Abundance issue, I won't have enough in the future. Yeah, I hear that. I really do hear that. I mean, what I would say goes in with that is maybe a lack of trust in the world and yourself that you're able to manifest. Because if it's something that you're not using, it may be something that somebody else could use. And actually what I find is that if we are holding on to too much clutter that we don't like and that we don't want, there's no space to manifest anything new. There's no space for new energy to come in. So if you're just holding on to the same dynamics, the same stuff for years and years and years, like you might want to receive some new things, but there's not a space for it to come in. So letting that stuff go creates space for something new to be invited in. So hopefully that makes sense. Listener, we hold on to stuff we don't need. It can come from a lack of mentality we don't trust. Oh, the universal power verse. Yeah, thank you, Listener. Listener and I agree. Awesome. We let go, it creates energetic space. That's so funny. Shows faith in yourself and your abilities. Yeah, so Lester gets it too. 100%. I love it. Yes, Lester, you hit the nail. Jennifer, I've been able to free up the nose, but difficulty not sabotaging the new. Okay, that's the next thing. Thank you for bringing that up, Jennifer. So let's move to the next step. The next step is your yeses. It's figuring out what your yeses are. And for some people, that's hard because again, if being indecisive has been a big thing for you, or if you just haven't experienced things in life that have felt like clear, easy yeses, then it actually means it's a time for you to explore and to try new things. So this is really about you figuring out what is compatible with me, what is compatible with who I really am. And again, that can be people, possessions. What is inspiring for me? What are the things in life that inspire me, that open my heart, that open my mind? And instead of me feeling possessive over them, it feels like a gift. It feels like something I want to invite in and experience. So it really is allowing you to get clear on a lot of it is how you want to feel and the quality of life that you want to have. So for people so Jennifer talks about sabotaging the new. That's a great way to put it. With new things, again, fear can come up because if the subconscious hasn't had an experience with something, it can be afraid because it doesn't know what's going to happen. So there will be a part of you that goes, well, this is new. I don't know what's going to happen. It's the unknown. It might hurt me. It might kill me. It might be worse. It might be a problem. And so the safer option is just to opt for the old stuff, the same thing we've been doing over and over and over again. This is why people stay in the same habits and patterns for years and years and years when it doesn't work for them. It's because part of them is saying, just stick with what you know. So it really is about, again, for me, this is about having courage. It's the facing your fears and kind of making that choice of, well, this is new for me, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to experience it, and I'm willing to play with it, and let it be a part of my life. And here's the cool thing. And again, it can go either way with some people. You get thousands of choices every day. So if you try something new and you don't like it, guess what? You get another choice. You just choose again. You're not stuck with it. You can always choose differently. And really, I feel like that's what this life and this plane and this planet is about. This is a place to create. It's a place to try new things. And yeah, you have an experience, you try something new and go, oh, that wasn't for me. Let me try another one that feels more aligned. And I will say that there will be a degree of intuition that comes in with this, and being able to follow your intuition and follow that feeling of what is a clear yes for you. So one of the big things for me around this is getting clear on what you value, and what you value in terms of your time, what you value in terms of, spending your energy, what you value in terms of your relationships. So something that I have really looked at over the years are kind of things around kind of feelings, emotions, and virtues, that feel really important for me. And this becomes your non-negotiable priorities. And non-negotiable, I understand, can feel like something that's very fixed and hard. That's not the way I mean it. What I mean about non-negotiable is you get so clear on how you want to feel in your life and how you want your daily experience to be, that that's what you continue to choose. And anytime you catch yourself reverting back or falling back into those old choices, you go, no, remember, we didn't like that. It didn't work for us. We're going to go into something that's new. So in terms of the values, what I look at is what I want to have at the heart of every relationship that I have. So whether it's with, my garden, or my partner, or my sister, or, my books, there are a few things that I want to have at the core of every single relationship. And if that's not there, either I work on myself or work on it so that it is a part of it, or maybe it's time for that to evolve into something else. So for me, it's things like respect. I mean, there's got to be a respect in every relationship. I need to respect what I'm connecting with. I want to be respected too. If the respect isn't there, there's something that needs to be healed. There's something that needs to be addressed. I want to respect the things that I have. I want to love the things that I have in my house. I respect them. They contribute to my life. So the things that I have in my office, in my home, contribute to my life. They make it better. Whether it's the color or the texture or the way I feel when I'm around it, there's something where it's contributing. So again, what's contributing to my life? The same, integrity, honesty, honor, those come up all the time for me. I want real integrity in the choices that I'm making and anything I'm interacting with. That's a big one for me. I want to honor the people I'm with by being honest and having integrity and being upfront and compassionate and kind with them. And I want the same in those relationships. Yeah. So, and again, that can be with how you spend your money. How do you want to spend your money? How does that contribute to your life? Are you spending it in ways that really feel like they're based in respect and honor for yourself, or for the people that you're paying, or for the goods that you're receiving? The same with your focus, your attention, your energy. Are you honoring yourself by, and again, I can be guilty of this. I used to love to just sit on Twitter and scroll. It's just so easy to do. You just scroll through, you get sucked up in it. That was not a great use of my time, because actually it became this kind of mindless thing where I was, just getting caught up in the drama that was there, and actually it wasn't doing anything for me. So I actually took it off my phone, and I'm really glad I did. I had a day or two where I missed it, and then I was absolutely fine. But there's this element of how do I honor my body, my mind, my spirit? Am I the way I'm spending my time, the yeses that I'm saying, is that doing it for me? And everybody's going to have different values. Some people really value adventure. They want like novelty. They want new experiences. They want to talk to different people and go to different countries and eat different food. And, they really want to be out of their comfort zone. They really thrive in that arena. So for them, it's kind of looking at, well, what are the choices that I make that contribute to me having adventure in my life? What am I saying yes to? For, if peace is your big thing, if you really just want to be peaceful and at peace within yourself, what are the choices I'm making every day? What am I saying yes to that contributes to my peace? If you're not, if the choices that you're making are continually connecting you with drama and suffering and difficulty and things like that, then you got to bring it back to yourself, but also look at, okay, what am I choosing that's taking away from that? What am I saying yes to? And then it becomes a no. But then saying, what are the things that do bring the peace? What are the things that help me experience love, joy, passion, excitement, laughter, fun, play? Again, it's really getting clear on what those values are and the values that you want to say yes to. Because when you make those choices to do that, life starts to follow you with that. But it really takes you saying no to the stuff that's destroying your peace and saying yes to the things that are going to contribute to it, that really makes that change, that really makes that shift. And when you get really clear on what your yeses are, it does start to become easier. The more you put it into practice, the more that you do it, it becomes an easier process. And when you find yourself slipping back onto Twitter or doing those things that are not helpful, you say, no, I'm going to stop this now. I'm going to move into something that's really going to nourish me and that's actually going to be helpful for my mind or body or spirit. Yeah. So in terms of, the yeses, I would really encourage you to take some time to meditate on that and you can even look back at your life and back at the times where you've been the most happy or the most fulfilled, where you felt most you in your own skin, the times where you really went, that I was doing something right there. And really, again, go into that. How was I feeling at that time? And what was contributing to this feeling? What types of people, what types of relationships? Again, how was I spending my time? What was the quality of my life then? What was contributing to that? That will, because the clearer you get on that and the more you start to choose that, the more it shows up in those relationships. Yeah. So basically what that does when you get those yeses and nos figured out is you start to move more and more into alignment. And when I say alignment, I'm talking about alignment with who you are on the deepest levels, like who you are at the core of you, not who you think you are, the identities and the labels and the roles that you play, but who you actually are. And Brene Brown, I like the way she puts this. She talks about the difference between belonging and fitting in. And for her, fitting in means that you bend your values, you leave part of yourself behind because you're trying to fit in with what other people want or what their expectations are. When you belong, you are centered and aligned and present in your own body, in your own space, in your own presence, and you show up authentically. And what happens is when you show up with that authenticity, that's what you project out. You don't project out the old paradigms and belief systems and trauma and stuff. You project out who you really are, and then your people find you. So that tribe you're looking for, those resonant people you're looking for, they're able to hear you and see you and find you when you show up authentically as yourself. So as long as we're trying to fit in, as long as we're bending ourselves and maintaining unhealthy boundaries, it's hard to find our people. Or it may be that you got some of the right people. You just need to clean up some of those boundaries so that the relationship can get healthier. That could also definitely be it for sure. But I really love that distinction between belonging and fitting in. So it's actually, we're going for belonging, and that alignment, that belonging comes from alignment. It's that integrity of what we say, what we think, what we do all matches. So we're not having these internal debates. We're not fighting within ourselves. We're not fighting the world around us. We're really showing up aligned, authentic, true. And again, that takes courage and it takes awareness. It takes real awareness and consciousness to move towards that. It can require some healing and again, some letting go of some old belief systems and paradigms and projections that we've maybe been doing for a long time. That's the big thing. Yes, if you can start to recognize again that what would it be like to really fully be aligned, to show up as I really am, not as my trauma and my pain, not as those labels and roles, but who I really am. What would that be like? What would that feel like? What would that look like for me? Yeah. So in terms of I want to talk a little bit, again, if there's any questions or anything, feel free to type away, but I want to talk a little bit about boundaries versus barriers and trauma responses, because this is where we get tripped up and where we revert back into the old stuff. So for me, there's a big difference between boundaries and barriers. And a boundary is something that is, again, coming from a place of real health, real love, understanding, honesty, authenticity. It's something that's there out of respect, out of honor for yourself and the person or the things that you're connecting with. So it's really based in your virtues and based in the best of who you are. Barriers are built out of fear. And fear does not create healthy boundaries ever. Fear is what causes us to have all kinds of unhealthy responses and dynamics with people. Barriers tend to be hard and fixed. They tend to be walls or armor or, these, whatever imagery goes with that for you. But they tend to be very stuck, very hard. And what they do is, because they're hard and fixed and stuck, you'll put them up to try to protect yourself or keep out the things that you don't want, but they will also keep out the things that you do. So what we really want in relationships, again, is honesty, it's intimacy, it's vulnerability, it's real connection. It's real connection. And barriers will stop that from happening, because you'll hide behind them and you won't be authentic and you won't be honest. And they don't really protect you. They don't do anything for you. All they do is weigh you down. All they do is create problems. Because as soon as those barriers go up, you can't see or hear anybody around you, and they can't see and hear you. So the thing that you're doing to try to protect yourself is actually creating the problems. So it's really about kind of looking at where have I set the barriers and how can I turn them into healthy boundaries and healthy choices. And having healthy boundaries can be a little more complex. Like on some level, it's like, I'll just stick up a wall and that's it. Like that feels easier. Whereas setting boundaries can sometimes be more complex, because, human beings are complex and our relationships can be complex. You may have somebody that you work with who is your manager, but also your friend. So you got a work relationship, but also a friend relationship. And how do you know which hat to wear? And how do you make sure that you're not allowing those things to commingle and become intertwined and messy? So again, that's where, when you start to get that discernment with the relationships and that discernment on your yeses and nos, some of that starts to become clearer. So again, it may feel like some of the stuff you're kind of fumbling through and working through, and that's okay. Because the more layers there are to a relationship, there's something to work with there. But again, if you can get back to these notions of it's based in respect, we honor each other, we're honest with each other, there's compassion there, there's patience there, then that's going to help to clear up a lot of those issues too. And in terms of the fear that creates those barriers, that tends to go back to our trauma and our pain from our past. So there's kind of the 4 F's, which are worth looking at and creating some awareness on. And you may find that you have a mixed response with these based on who you're talking to or what that relationship is. But we tend to, when we have a trauma response, when we're triggered and our fear comes up and we're in either we feel like there's a confrontation or maybe some type of fear or danger that comes up. Again, it may be an emotional response. We move into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I knew I was going to forget this. So fight, flight, freeze were the ones that people talk about for years and years. Fawn has been added, and we'll talk about that. So the fight response is, I feel like I'm being threatened, or somebody is not being kind to me, or I feel like I'm being pushed against. So I'm going to fight back. I'm going to get aggressive or mean. I'm going to tell them all the ways that they're wrong. I'm going to take them down a few notches. That's that fight response. So some people have a really quick fight response, or they have it with certain people. We know that doesn't help. That comes from trauma. Flight means you just try to run away and avoid it. You're like, oh no, I'm not going to deal with it. It's too scary. It's too big. It's too much. I'm either going to get out of the situation or I'm going to shut down. I'm going to avoid. I'm just not going to engage in it. I'm going to run away energetically or emotionally from that. This happens in a lot of relationships where people feel shut down, where they feel like they're not heard, or where it's just they don't know how to have difficult conversations. Yeah, that can happen. So the freeze is that is just that. And I can recognize in the past where I've had that freeze response in certain situations. It's kind of that, like, well, if I'm just really quiet and I'm really still, they don't have anything to push against or fight against. So maybe it'll just end it there. Of course, that never worked either. Yeah, so a lot of times people freeze up in those situations because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to respond. And the fourth one that people are talking about more, which I find really interesting, is the fawning. And fawning means that you just go, oh, okay, I'll just agree with everything you say. You're right. You got it. I'll let you decide. I'll let you take care of it. I'll let you do it because I'll just agree with you. Even if I don't agree with you, I'm going to outwardly agree with you so that we don't have an argument, or so that there's not a conflict here. And so again, you may have a mixture of these going on, but you may have one or two that feel more, I don't know, that you feel like you move into more easily. So when you start to recognize that, these are trauma responses, and so many of our problems in relationships come from their trauma responses. We are responding to our old pain and suffering, either from childhood. It can be really old stuff. And we're bringing that baggage into these relationships. We're bringing all this obligation, all these projections, all these fears, and it gets dumped onto other people, and they dump their stuff onto us too, for sure. It's often a two-way street. But when you can start to recognize, am I reacting from trauma? Am I reacting to this person out of fear? Am I reacting to this person out of pain? Is this just an old trigger that's come up again? That's when you can start to change that dynamic. That's when you can start to, and there's a difference between react and respond. React is the condition, quick, I'm just gonna, here you go, this is it. A response is when you take that moment, and instead of reacting out of trauma, you take a moment to breathe and say, how do I really want to respond to this? How do I really want to show up in this moment? How do I really want to communicate with this person? And there's a very different energy in the two of those. And it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they're saying or that they're doing, but it means that it's not your fear taking over and motivating you to act in ways that are outside of your integrity or outside of how you want to be. So a lot of this process is really about disrupting yourself, just disrupting those old patterns and habits and reactions that you're used to having. And so two of the kind of the best things I found to address this, one's a way to look at things and one's a little bit of a technique-ish, but also awareness, is to look at issues around vulnerability. And when I say vulnerability, I know that can be a loaded word for a lot of people because they associate vulnerability with being hurt, being abused, being mistreated, being wounded. And that is not what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is a willingness to be open. It is a willingness to have the courage to engage. And if we want to be loved, my God, that requires vulnerability. If we want to be seen for who we are, we have to be open for people to see us. We need to, we have to have an openness to that. Again, if those barriers are up, they don't see us. That's not being vulnerable. It's not being brave. It's not being courageous. That's fear. So when we're looking at vulnerability, it's really looking at, how do I understand myself enough? How do I trust myself enough? How do I understand my own ability to be empowered and courageous so that I can introduce some vulnerability into my relationships so that there actually can be some connection, so that there can actually be some communication? Because if you're not vulnerable, none of that is going to be there. So again, I would encourage you to look at the things around vulnerability that are maybe feel a bit unsettling, a little bit scary. So you can kind of redefine that word for yourself and look at, what are the ways that I'm hard and fixed and invulnerable that are creating issues? And how can I be more open and vulnerable to there being a new outcome or something new? And one of the best ways I found to do this, and this is definitely something I figured out to do, and I sometimes have to remind myself, it's a practice, is I know that I realized in the past that when I was having hard or what I felt were difficult conversations because my fear was getting triggered, my old stuff was getting triggered, I realized that I would get defensive, I would get scared, I would shut down, I would have all these responses that I didn't like and that didn't help the situation. And so I really sat with that and kind of went, what can I do differently that's going to help? Because, conversation, you have the same conversation 800 times, nothing changes because you're both like, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm in my pain. I'm going to let you know it. I'm going to punish you for it. So what I did was I was like, this conversations aren't getting anywhere. Well, what can I do differently to help disrupt that energy and make it different? And so the thing that came up was, I am going to de-armor myself. So when I sit down to have this conversation, I am going to consciously open my body and relax my shoulders. I'm going to sit back in the chair. So I'm going to open my body to help me remember to open my heart and my mind. And anytime I feel myself being like, yeah, but you, or tensing up or be like, oh no, I would take a breath and open up again. And it wasn't that I had to agree with everything that they were saying. It was just the intention was, I am going to de-armor. I'm going to take down my defenses so that I can hear them. I want to actually hear what they have to say. And there may be something I can learn from it. There may be something I can take on board from it. I don't know. I'm just going to be open to hearing it. And actually, for some people, just being heard is healing and is what they need. So that can diffuse a lot of things when people go, oh, that person's actually listening to me. So what happens is when you de-armor, when you allow yourself to be open and vulnerable, you can hear other people. Because as soon as you get defensive, the other person gets defensive, and then nothing gets communicated. It just becomes projection, fear. So, and again, I have to remind myself to do this sometimes. I have to remember, okay, I recognize where I'm getting defensive. Let me take a breath, de-armor, let me let it all down. And let me just hear what they had to say. And I'll take the bits where I go, oh yeah, actually, I didn't realize I was doing that. Or yeah, I can see a bit of truth in there. Let me take that and work with that. Let me see what I can do about that. How can I learn from that? How can I grow from that? So again, it takes courage. It takes courage to do that. But I would really encourage you, if you know you've got a difficult conversation coming up, or if one just comes up, that act of kind of de-armoring and listening is very powerful. And that's what actually helps you to resolve issues, is by being able to do that. So again, it may be a practice, but it's one worth doing. It's one worth doing. Oh, Lester, that's perfect. When you create a fortress, be careful not to imprison yourself within it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's what we do with that armor and with those barriers. We become trapped in it. Yeah, so some of the ways that this stuff can show up physically, I just want to address this because people ask me about this stuff all the time. With unhealthy boundary issues, it can show up in a lot of ways, but what I see a lot is issues with the skin. And that can be inflammation, irritation, rashes, acne, things like that. It can show up in different ways. But if you think about, like, the skin is the barrier for the body. So if we are having energetic or emotional issues with the boundaries, it can show up in the skin often. Not always, but that is a way it can manifest. It can also show up in pain and injury and suffering in the shoulders and the back, because we're carrying burdens that are not ours to carry. It's that obligation stuff. And often what happens is that we forget that we are only responsible for ourselves, and we are not responsible for anyone else. We are not responsible for anyone else's emotions or feelings. We're not responsible for their actions. We are responsible for our feelings, emotions, and actions. That's what we are responsible for. But oftentimes, out of fear, we want to be responsible for others because we're trying to control them on some level. And again, this may be totally unconscious. You may not see it in that way, but there's a fear and a desire to control an outcome or control a response or control the way they interact with us. And so the more we're trying to control the world around us, the more we're trying to control our relationships, or sometimes even controlling stuff within ourselves. That's a burden. That is an obligation. It's heavy to carry. It's too much. And it's a fight because you can't even do it. You can't control other people. You can't control anything. You can choose and create and manifest. You can show up and bring the energy you want to bring. You can't control anything in the world. So yeah, so that can often show up in, feeling burdened, feeling weighed down, feeling run down, things like that. So again, exhaustion again. Um, Things around, and I know this was one of my things was migraines. I mean, migraines are often about control stuff. For me, I was trying to control all my psychic stuff. It was all the psychic stuff going on. I was trying to control. And that was what was creating my migraines. So when I stopped trying to control all that and made peace with it, my migraines resolved. Um, and it can also show up in things like with your feet and your knees. That's often things around, again, indecision, not wanting to choose, which if you don't choose, then people will choose for you. And you'll get to experience what you don't like so that you can figure out what you do like. um, so, oh yeah, I can feel some energy in that. Take a breath. So again, if there's some stubbornness or indecision, that can show up in the knees, the ankles, the feet, that with that moving forward, or fear of moving forward, that can show up there too. And then things like the microbial stuff, so infections, parasites, some viruses, some of that stuff can show you that. So if you're having, especially if you're having recurrent issues with that or issues with it over and over again, there's usually an issue around boundaries because you're allowing that stuff in and allowing it to do things to your body that aren't good for your body. Yeah. So again, that's not a whole list. It's just a little bit of an overview of how it can show up and some common ways that shows up for people. Yeah. So in terms of kind of moving forward, because I know a lot of people are kind of going, well, okay, well, what do I do in my life? Because I can't control other people. I can't make them act a certain way. So how do I change my relationships? And that's a great question. No, you can't control other people. But what happens is when you start to resolve this stuff and when you start to create an awareness of it and you start to respond differently, it changes the energy in the dynamic. It changes the energy in the relationship. And so the same patterns can't keep happening because that energy is not there anymore. And you're not on some level allowing it to happen anymore. So you can't really have the same reactions between, again, whether it's a person or things around you. Something's got to change. So for me, that's actually a really empowering thing that if I go, well, if I show up differently, then the relationship has to show up differently. The dynamic has to show up differently. The communication has to be different. And what happens is if you are, creating awareness and working through these things and getting clear on what you're really wanting, that respect, honor, value, all that stuff. So when people talk about raising your vibration, that's what that is. Like, there's all this mystery about how do you raise your vibration. It sets some boundaries. Get some clarity on how you want to live your life. Start living your virtues, living those higher energies. That's raising your vibration. So when you start showing up as a person who is going to perpetuate and contribute respect and honor and care and love to a relationship, that raises your vibration. So the people in your life have got to come and meet you up here. And it might take them a little bit of time. They've got to have their own journey with it, but it means that they can't, there's not stuff here for them to react against. You're not responding to that stuff anymore. So they've got to meet you up here. So the relationship has to improve, or maybe it'll end and finish or take a pause or, whatever it's going to do. But this is where the empowerment comes in. It's that thing of, well, if I just focus on myself and I work on myself, the world around me can start to respond differently. And I don't need to worry about them. I just focus on me. Yeah. Yes. And the great thing, well, great, I don't know. What's interesting about it is that the relational always comes back to us. So if there is someone in your life that is triggering your stuff, what they're doing is they're helping highlight what you need to heal and what you need to address within yourself. That's what's happening there. Because once you heal and address that stuff, you can't be triggered anymore because there's not a trigger there. There's nothing to be triggered. And we get really caught up in what the other person is doing. or all the clutter in our house, how it's making us feel, or, whatever it is that's going on. That thing is doing that to us. But it's just reflecting back what we need to heal within ourselves. That's all it's doing. So if you can look at your relationships as, so Ram Dass talks about how, I've talked about this a lot lately because I really love it and want to tell everybody. I was listening to one of his books, and because we talk a lot in the healing world about how through the negative experiences, you still learn really positive lessons. You learn about yourself, you develop gifts and skills, you just learn some really incredible things. He talks about how he changed the language around that. So instead of learning lessons, which can feel a little harsh, it is that they are opportunities for awakening. How good is that? Breathe that in. So whatever a person is triggering in me, it is my opportunity to awaken more and recognize that there's some old hurt or pain there for me to address and deal with. And I then become more conscious and aware of who I am, of my past, of my behaviors, and maybe some of the unconscious things that I've done without realizing I was doing it. So if there are ways that I've hurt other people or not respected them fully or haven't listened to them well, or, things that have felt painful for them and I just haven't been conscious or aware of it, I can start to become more aware of those things, of how I'm showing up too. So there is a beauty in the difficult relationships that we have because they are opportunities for awakening. What I will say is that you can kind of energetically release people from the obligation of doing that for you in difficult ways. Because we want to awaken the greatness in each other. Like, really, that's what we want to have in relationships. But if we are still working through trauma and pain, then relationships can draw our attention to what needs healing. That's all it's doing. So anything you're seeing in a relationship with another person or a possession or a country or a tree, it's coming back and going, what is this triggering within me? Why am I reacting this way? What is this bringing up in me that needs some attention and that needs some care? Yes. Yeah. So I would really encourage you to kind of take some time. I'm just thinking about the astrology. We've got some cool stuff going on right now. I mean, really briefly, we're the sun and Jupiter are conjunct today, which you want to talk about great luck and good stuff. Like getting clear on what you really want. Today, tomorrow is a good time to do it. I mean, within the next couple of days we're in that window, I would say. But the sun moves a degree a day, so it'll be out of Jupiter's range in the next week, definitely. I would say it's a great time right now to look at what are the things that light me up. What are the things that when I engage with them, I feel that benevolence of life. I feel the benevolence of the universe. I feel like there is goodness in the world and there is goodness within me. And I just love to be a part of it. So whether that's coffee with friends, whether that's for me, I talk about this a lot, live music, live theater. Oh, that's my heaven. That's my church. What is it? What are the things that contribute to the quality of life that you want to leave? These next few days are an amazing time to explore that, because the cosmos has the energy to help support us in that. Yeah, Jennifer, we're all mirrors, definitely. So I would really encourage you to spend some time with that over the coming days and weeks, really getting clear on spending time, if it's journaling, if it's meditating, what are the no's, what are the actions, the choices that do not contribute to my health, that do not contribute to my happiness, that do not contribute to the way I want to live? What can I start to say no to? What are the things that do contribute? How can I make that non-negotiable? How can I make that a yes, an absolute definite yes in my life? And then start to recognize the alignment with those things and how close and how clear that alignment is being. How much are you getting into that sense of authenticity, really living that integrity, being able to be authentic and honest? So what I want to do is I'm going to take us through just a couple minutes meditation. And then we'll stop it there and stop the video, and we can do some questions at the end of that. So this is just going to be a couple minutes, a really brief one. So if you want to, again, just take a moment and get settled in your seat, close your eyes. Just taking a few nice deep breaths. And just take a moment to imagine your skin breathing. So our skin breathes, it's porous. It's not this hard shell. There's meant to be some ebb and flow, some give and take, just like our boundaries, where we make choices about what we want to receive and what we want to give. And we have the discernment to do that. So if your skin feels just too open, and that you just say yes to everything, you just allow everything, take a moment and imagine what it would be like for your skin to be a healthier consistency. And if your skin feels too solid, too stuck, too much like a shell, imagine what it could be to breathe a little bit, so that you can allow in some goodness, some care, some affection, some joy. And then allow yourself to get a sense of the health of your boundaries in your life. Maybe some similarities to what you were picking up on in your skin, or different areas may feel different. And this is just for you. You don't have to share this with anyone, so you can be honest with yourself. Allow yourself to start to identify the areas of your life where you could end some patterns, where you could change your choices and stop some things that are unhealthy. So that could be your relationship with food and the choices that you're making. There might be some no's in there. There may be some no's you could introduce with how you spend your money, what you're spending your money on, what you're consuming. There may be some no's that you could introduce in how you spend your time. You're overcommitting, you're exhausting yourself, you're doing things that you don't want to do, but you feel like you should, or you ought to, or you have to. There may be some no's in terms of communication and how you want to speak to others and how you want to be spoken to. So you're going to think about how you spend your time, your energy, your focus. You get a sense of what's draining you, what's exhausting you, and what you could start to say no to with love and compassion. And then take a breath. Allow yourself to focus on the things you want to say yes to, things that you want to be doing on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, the things you want to experience in your lifetime. What you really value and how you really want to feel. And allow yourself to recognize the ways you've been denying yourself those joys, or the fun, or the excitement, or the peace. How have you denied yourself? How have you stopped yourself? What would you like to start saying yes to? What do you value most in the world that you want to experience more of? How would it feel? So with those, all those no's, the healthy no's and the healthy yeses, think about what it would be like to be more in alignment with who you really are, the life you want to live, the quality of life you want to live. And just imagine being more in alignment with that, having more clarity on that, allowing yourself to choose it. And that sense of belonging, that sense of home within you that brings. And even if you're only getting a few words or bits and pieces, that's okay. It's a great start. It's important to take some time with this. It's also things that will evolve over time. Just allow yourself to get a feel for it right now. And just take a few nice deep breaths. Allow those feelings to be present in your body and in your cells, in your energy field. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much.